What is going on, guys? It is Wrestlelamia here, back with another video. Now, the horror show at Extreme Rules will soon be upon us, so what will the WWE do to wash the taste of last week's Smackdown karaoke out of our mouths and hype the pay-per-view? Join us now as Wrestlelamia looks at the 17th July of Smackdown, as well as the wildest wrestling news stories you need to know, including Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows shoot hard on the WWE and Paul Heyman, Triple H showed his desperation, Lio Rush calls out Finn Balor and Balor responds, Alexa Bliss is frustrated, and much more. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos. But now let's get straight into the good, the bad, and the downright ugly of last night's Smackdown. And as always, we start off with the good as number 1, a new opening format. Last night's Smackdown opened up with short interviews by several wrestlers involved in the show, providing a 1-2 punch that let the fans know what matches to expect and a chance to give superstars some time to work on their microphone skills. As several pundits noted, this segment was reminiscent of the original Saturday night's main event, where wrestlers called out their opponents as Vince McMahon ran down the matches. The WWE is at a point where they're willing to try anything, and while there have been some real misses, such as SmackDown's karaoke segment last week, this was a hit and should be incorporated every week. It's a great way to put talent over and build interest for the show. Number 2, a magnificent main event. Matt Riddle vs AJ Styles is a dream match between a veteran grappler who is arguably still at the top of his game and a rising star who could quickly reach the top of the WWE mountain. While the WWE could be criticized for giving away a pay-per-view level match on TV, which it did, and it's done this in the past, this match served multiple purposes, so the criticism doesn't hold up. Not only did this match serve as a great main event giving the fans a reason to stay tuned, it put over both Styles and Riddle, and it set the stage for a rematch down the road, and it helped put over the program between the Ultimate Bro and King Corbin, a feud pretty much neither man wanted to do. And number 3, good pay-per-view build-up. Last night's show did what any go-home show is supposed to do, build up the fans' interest in the pay-per-view. Whether it was Braun Strowman's obvious descent into darkness, utterly destroying John Morrison, Bray Wyatt's chilling promo from the swamp, or the escalating violence between the New Day and Shinsuke and Cesaro, the WWE gave fans a reason to watch the pay-per-view this Sunday. But that was the good. What about the bad? As number 1, a moment of disappointment. Alexa Bliss's surprise guest was a major disappointment as she introduced Raw Women's Champion Asuka, basically furthering the Asuka vs Sasha Banks match at Extreme Rules, along with Nikki Cross vs Bayley. With Bliss discussing the 5-year anniversary of the Women's Revolution, some fans were hoping there would be an announcement concerning the long-rumored Evolution 2 pay-per-view, and one rumor has it Stephanie McMahon would be there. Instead, we got a tired segment with the Golden Role Models crashing the segment and the predictable follow-up match. Now don't get us wrong, we always love to see Asuka whether it's on Raw or SmackDown or even NXT, but this just seemed like a cheap ploy for us fans to tune in, as had they announced that Asuka was just going to be on a Moment of Bliss, I don't think many fans would have tuned in to see that. And whilst we're not in the news just yet, interestingly, right before SmackDown aired, Alexa Bliss tweeted, "Frustrated beyond belief." If she's referring to WWE, she's made her frustrations known in the past regarding her WWE promos. She tweeted in December when a fan shared a clip of an old promo by Bliss. She replied, "I remember a time when I was given a microphone in the middle of the ring. Good times." Was she frustrated by this segment and knew that the backlash would come onto her for the disappointment? She may reveal more soon. Number 2, searching for stipulations. Although the WWE did a good job building up Extreme Rules, there's no reason to keep the stipulation for the New Day vs Shinsuke Cesaro match a mystery, unlike Ziggler vs McIntyre, where the suspense adds to the illusion that Ziggler might defeat the WWE Champion due to an off-the-wall stipulation. Unfortunately, it appears the WWE hasn't decided on the stipulation itself, which isn't a good sign for the pay-per-view if the WWE hasn't finished writing it. Number 3, Bayley and Banks overload. Okay, now we are being a bit hypocritical here, as last week, as we mentioned, Banks and Bayley are the ones carrying SmackDown, but as entertaining as they are, they've cut into television time for the rest of the women's division, and the WWE needs to either pull the trigger on the Banks vs Bayley feud or scale back their never-ending appearances. And number 4, no love for Naomi. Naomi counted the lights for Lacey Evans last night, leading to the fans of the Glow losing their minds on social media. Naomi, a 2-time SmackDown Women's Champion, returned to the WWE at this year's Royal Rumble, putting in a highly acclaimed performance before her eventual elimination. However, she's been out of the spotlight for most part, leading to tweets like the following. had the biggest pop of any women in her return at the Royal Rumble, went viral for weeks, yet they decide to have women like Dana and Lacey beat Naomi when she is by far better all round and has much larger following / interest. This is a joke. Naomi's loss last night also led to the hashtag Naomi deserves better, and we kind of agree. Naomi does deserve a lot better. She deserves better than karaoke, she deserves better than a meaningless feud with Mandy Rose, she deserves better than just counting the lights. She has a lot of talent, and that's not been showcased correctly. Now, we understand the problem of course is that there are a number of talented women on all three brands, but the WWE has been revolving everything around the golden role models as they build to what they're likely hoping will be a huge feud between Banks and Bayley. But does Naomi deserve better? Let us know in the comments down below. Thankfully, nothing ugly about last night's show, and frankly the WWE would have had made a seriously hard effort to have this week's show match up to last week's disaster. Smackdown did a good job building up Extreme Rules and also furthering some storylines. Like Raw, Smackdown's biggest problem is that the WWE is unwilling to adopt a long-term strategy for its shows, instead trying something different and seeing how it does with the ratings. It kinda reminds us the later days of WCW, where they would just try anything to see if it stuck at the wall. What do you guys think of Smackdown though? Let us know in the comments down below. Now, let's get into the news. Now our first story looks at Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows, a shoot on the WWE and Paul Heyman. Now that their no-compete clause is over, former WWE superstars Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows are free to discuss their WWE run, and they're not holding back. Let's look at a few of the big takeaways from Anderson and Gallows' talk on their podcast, Talk and Shop. The first is that they have signed with Impact, and they almost signed with AEW. The talented team announced they've signed with Impact Wrestling, but almost jumped to All Elite Wrestling as their WWE contracts came up for renewal. They chose to re-up with the WWE, with rumor having it that this upset Chris Jericho, who'd hoped the team would show up. They mentioned, "We have other friends in that company. We don't have to drop a bunch of names. It's not that kind of an interview, but it's not hard to figure out." A friend who is in a high power position there and wrestler who was like, "What the F guys?" I think that he's still a little offended by it, and my answer to him, if he ever hears this or reads the transcript, was none of this was ever personal. We appreciated the offer and everything everyone was trying to do for us. Now, the duo regretted their decision, as in hindsight, they wish they could have been on the premiere of AEW Dynamite. Karl Anderson shared what might have happened had they jumped from the WWE to AEW. "Machine gun music is gonna hit. I'm gonna come out. Gallows comes from behind. We walk to the ring, we too sweet the Young Bucks and Kenny. Turn around, everyone's happy, and then we beat the F out of them. It's one of the biggest regrets in my life that didn't happen. Kills me. That would have made Dynamite's debut even more impressive than it was. So what motivated the Good Brothers to stick with the WWE, as it seems that Triple H got a little bit desperate for them to stay. Anderson and Gallows also spoke of how Triple H convinced them to stay in the WWE after a conversation in Japan. You may recall Hunter teamed up with Anderson and Gallows at the WWE Super Show in Japan, and afterwards, Hunter approached the team about what the WWE needed to do to keep them. Anderson and Gallows were persuaded after Hunter told them, "I look at you and I see your kids, and what if AEW doesn't last? I promise you WWE will always be here." The WWE threw a small fortune at the team, persuading them to stay along with the usual promise of a better push as well as a longer deal. Not to mention going a little bit personal and involving their family and seeing what's best for them. Kind of a bit of a lowbrow tactic if you ask us. Gallows and Anderson reiterated, "It was clearly just a business decision. We're looking at a 5-year deal as opposed to a 2-year deal with maybe a 1-year option. When you start calculating that money and where you're going to be in 5 years, especially with you're going to be here for the full term and there's plans for you after and all that, you're stacking millions and millions and millions and millions up against ultimately a smaller figure. Should we have taken the smaller figure, bet on ourselves and done something really cool again like we were in New Japan? Yes. Is this the egg on our face? It's running down my fucking face right now." The Good Brothers were about to make fantastic money and supposedly get a good push, so it seemed like a can't lose situation. But they called Paul Heyman an effing liar. While Anderson and Gallows were ready to make some serious bucks from their new WWE contract, they were also hoping for the promised push. Paul Heyman, who was in charge of Raw's creative at the time, supposedly promised them a huge push. However, jobbing them to Ricochet and later suffering a humiliating handicap match loss to Drew McIntyre made them question if and when the push was ever going to come. That would be the least of the team's worries though, as they were released on 15th April, a move which shocked them as they claimed Heyman seemed high on their role on Raw. During their recent podcast, Anderson and Gallows revealed that they discovered after their release that Paul Heyman had asked Vince McMahon to release them. The team claims this was confirmed by AJ Styles, who heard this from Vince McMahon. Needless to say, Styles was furious with Heyman, and this was supposedly the reason Styles jumped to Smackdown. Gallows had some choice words for Heyman, noting he's 100% full of bullshit and a lying mother. This shouldn't have come as a surprise given Heyman's long-standing reputation in the wrestling industry. And finally, Finn Balor responds to Lio Rush calling him out. Lio Rush apparently has a lot on his chest, and thanks to social media, he's always ready to voice his concerns. Recently, Rush tweeted about a rumored issue involving him and Finn Balor. Let's nip this in the bud. I never had any beef with Finn Balor. I texted you and told you I didn't know where this story would even come from, and your words exactly were, I don't want to say anything about it publicly because it would draw more attention to the situation. And then I told you I'd appreciate it if you diffused this situation because I thought we were cool from the times your wife now watched my son at live events. I knew you had the power and influence to do that. You never texted me back, and you never diffused the story. Why? Well, Balor actually replied and said, Leo, I've always been very fond of you both in and out of the ring. As I told you before, there is no heat. I chose to live life in reality and not worry about people makeup online. I'm only tweeting this because I know it's important to you. If you want to talk, call me. Finn Balor appears to think there's nothing for Rush to be concerned about, but his offer to talk to Rush over the phone is a good example of how to keep private business, particularly rumors, out of the public eye. Leo probably could have resolved this whole issue by just privately DMing Finn Balor instead of making this all public. But there you have it guys, the wildest wrestling news stories and rumors you need to know. Be sure to leave your comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.